Welcome to the Spring Discussion Day. We're going to discuss the issues with supply, some of the pricing issues out there in the marketplace at the moment, also about soil testing, feed pricing and feed availability. Hope you enjoy. Thank you very much. We're going to move forward now to Kyle Roper, who's going to give us an update of what's going on with availability of some commodities and planning.
G'day everybody. Thanks everyone for jumping on and hanging in there. So I guess some of the issues we're looking at present in terms of commodity supply is obviously fertiliser prices are historically high at the moment, and that looks like continuing to rise in the coming months as well. So this is being pushed from basically global issues, high demand in America and South America, and a shortfall in production worldwide, which has been pushed upon, with high gas prices and things like that as well, and just not being able to keep up with demand. Locally, we're seeing these prices here, DAP at $1,300 odd, single super 620, urea around 1,100, and muriate of potash at 950. Let's say a landed price in store is what we're seeing. Generally, we'd see a little bit of a drop going forward into the season, but we probably don't think that that's going to occur just due to that high demand of a successful winter crop and high use in those winter crops, as well as the outlook of a fairly high summer crop planting out west. So I guess where that's leading to the discussion is planning to get these products that you need on hand, or at least talking to your supplier, because the one issue we're seeing is, for instance, businesses like ourselves will have a contract with a fertiliser company for product, and at the present time we can't actually even get access to that product. So it's beyond kind of that store level control. So talking with your store to try and get some stuff on hand if you're going to be doing summer crops, or even just your regular top dressing, trying to make sure that you do have supply of those products going forward into spring and summer. That's going to be a critical part of your operation, and trying to keep all these other things we've mentioned today of feed quality and good quality feed in front of your animals. So I guess on the fertiliser front, as I said, that's not going to change. We don't see that changing over the next few months, where we'd normally see a drop in fertiliser prices going into the new year. So be prepared for that one in terms of budgeting and things like that. In terms of ag chem, there is issues. Glyphosate has gone through the roof in price. That's being influenced just really from raw material issues and supply, obviously with COVID and environmental changes in China in terms of manufacturing of those raw materials. Big focus will be on, if you are planning to do corn or sorghum and looking to use atrazine and dual gold or metoclor, look to get your hands on that product as soon as you can. It is very tight, and those guys out west will obviously use a lot of that product as well. So try to get onto your local store and organise those things in your planning. Silage preservation products, so your plastic silage wrap and things like that, dramatic price increases, which align with, I guess, gas and oil commodity pricing. So we've seen a very sharp jump of around 30% in terms of those products. So be aware of that if you're getting into doing silage, and try and get that. And supply is very hand to mouth with some of those suppliers at the moment. So freight, coming from overseas, most of those plastic products, silage films, are produced overseas. So trying to land those products has been a big issue. So we're seeing delays of up to 3 months with some of those things coming in. So try and get your hands on that stuff if you are planning silage. On a positive note, seed supply is very positive. We've only seen some shortfalls in some short season corn varieties, but generally most corn varieties are very in good supply. Sorghums are in good supply. Millet, cowpeas, all those kind of summer forages are readily available. So that's a positive note there. Neil mentioned it before, hay supply is probably looking good, but quality is an issue. So we say, get that feed test. If someone doesn't want to give you a feed test, you probably want to question why. Make sure you're buying on that basis. When you're looking at ME and protein and things like that, even lucerne can be, I guess everyone goes, oh, I'm buying lucerne hay or something like that, but I've seen some pretty bad lucerne hay results as well. So do get a feed test, and you can definitely save yourself some issues there.
Just what I've been seeing over the last month or so as well, there still is some hay around, but the quality is really hard to find at the moment. Not to mention the new crops coming through, but what's out there at the moment, there is some pretty poor stuff that's being flicked around.
100%, and some of that stuff coming out of the west in terms of mice damage and things like that, I guess no one really predicted how big an impact that was going to have, and that has played a big part on especially cereal hays and contamination. I know in the next presentation we're going to talk about, I guess, botulism and things like that, but being aware of that as well with silage or hay that you might be bringing in, or grain for that matter as well. So yeah, keeping that in mind is, that quality issue is a big concern at present. Yeah, moving on, I guess, where we've mentioned that about talking with your service providers, and that planning part is going to be the major thing over the next couple of months to make sure you're going well for your summer crop, and looking into that. In terms of when selecting summer crop options, carefully review alternative strategies. So, extending that grass season in terms of ryegrass varieties and things like that with your Italians and where they're sitting, multi versus single cut options. So again, that quality factor as well in that, and what you're trying to conserve. And, I think we've mentioned a few times, Neil, with growing versus purchasing. So looking at those costs of production, growing on farm versus bringing that hay in, managing the cash flow and the risk. There is potential risk with seasonal conditions in terms of rainfall and flooding and things like that, of those, single cut options with corn and things like that. So managing that risk and not putting your whole farm obviously into one of those situations is something we do need to look at when we're, the information given to us at the moment is that, we are going into a possible favourable spring-summer situation. So any other comments on there, Neil? Or
look, I think that's a great summary, Kyle, and I guess I think it's really important with your planning that we're not just thinking about our costs of production. We also need to think about do you really have the storage systems in place for what you're planning? Do you have the feed out systems that minimise wastage? Because our budget on corn that might look at 230, 240 a tonne dry matter, if we're going to waste 25% of that feeding it out on the ground, that starts becoming a very, very expensive crop for a lot of people. And I think it's an absolute winner if we've got high fertility already in the soils and we get good yields, but it's a very expensive crop if we don't get those yields and we waste a lot of it. And I guess it's just looking at these, you've got to look at this matrix of options that we have available and make sure you've got a cohesive plan that fits your whole farm business, not just the fact that you might want to grow some particular crop for some, particular reason. So no, terrific, Kyle.
Yeah, and especially when those possible buying prices are where they are predicted to be, you've really got to focus on that if you're not set up for it. So.
Absolutely. And look, the little attention to detail, things like messing up your pre-emergence, absolutely critical. I mean, if you can't get your pre-emergent on or it's not available as part of your issue, then, you've really got to question sowing it in the first place. So, that organisation is going to be critical, and understanding when you need to step out is probably an important thing too, when it just isn't a good option.
Yeah, 100%. And tackling things in sorghum or corn post-emergent is just not realistic. So, yeah, I see corn as a recipe, and if one part of that recipe is missing, the cake's not going to rise as such. So, make sure everything's ticked off. In terms of soil testing, and again, similar to the feed testing situation, when we're looking at fertiliser prices being as high as they are, Neil, Josh, myself, and, probably see a lot of soil tests where, we may be putting things onto country that, is not needed. We may have good phosphorus, and, with DAP or your starters being up over $1,300 a tonne, am I really chasing phosphorus at the moment if things are right? So doing a soil test and identifying where your need for whatever nutrient may be, your limiting factor is very important in terms of identifying that and then treating that going on, especially when prices are where they are. So you may need more potassium, and we're not going to be able to identify that without a soil test generally, or phosphorus may be a limiting factor. So get that soil test done, especially when you're planning for summer crop and things like that are hungry. That's also important going forward. So when we're looking at that, we're not wanting to waste money on those nutrients that are not needed. And yeah, going forward from there. So try and get things like that organised, I guess, going ahead. Josh made the point with, I guess, the high rainfall issue that we saw over, early this year. So, we did have a lot of leaching and, being on farm this year, we did see big issues with nitrogen losses and just not getting that response from the normal amounts of nitrogen we would put on. So taking that into account as well, setting up further into this year is critical to look at as well.
I'll just mention, I don't know if Jim, I can't see who's actually still on, but if Jim Laycock is still on, feel free to jump in, mate, and add some comments as well. But yeah, definitely that flooding and the water going over and leaching some of the nutrients out that we had, really important to get back in soil tests so we know what we got. Like you said, it's about, working out your most limiting factor, and let's try and get the biggest bang for our buck.
Yep. So here we've got, I guess we've had a lot of questions in terms of, urea being so high in price. Am I still going to get a viable response? Is it still cost effective? And I think the answer from myself is definitely yes. We're looking at going into spring on ryegrass. We're generally seeing that, as a minimum now with good soil moisture and that nutrition, you're seeing a 15 to 20 to 1 response per kilo of nitrogen for dry matter production. So, we've run some figures there on urea at $1,000 a tonne and where that leads us to of producing feed at, around that $110 a tonne, let's say, at 20 to 1 response. So, when you're seeing those kind of numbers put in front of you, if things are right, it's still, far cheaper than looking at purchasing in feed on a per tonne dry matter basis. So I guess what we're saying is, if even with these higher nitrogen prices that we're seeing, it is still very cost effective to be applying nitrogen going forward. So don't be afraid of doing that. And again, that's not even looking at the quality factors, I guess, of improvement, quality of what Neil said in terms of IQ and those situations where we're seeing a lift in ME in those summer forages. So important to keep that in mind as well.
It's critical, Colin. Whenever we go into modelling exercises to try and put an equivalent feed together to high quality, particularly ryegrass pastures, the only thing that gets vaguely close is top shelf lucerne hay.
Yeah.
So you buy equivalent to reasonable quality ryegrass pasture, or even conserved high quality ryegrass silage. We're looking at $300 to $350 a tonne dry matter.
At least. Yep. Any other questions on that kind of front?
Good job, Kyle. Well, thanks for joining us on the seasonal update for the commodity pricing and some of the issues with supply going forward in through spring and summer. Don't forget, there's another 4 topics out there to listen to. We've got managing changing conditions and dealing with fat and protein changes, and also how do you deal with fat depression. Also grazing management and dealing with spring surplus. Animal health, especially 3-day sickness, and what are the risks going forward this year. Managing heat stress, and what can you do on your farm to reduce some of the issues that really impact on heat stress in our environments. So thanks very much. Have a good day. Talk to you soon.